Greetings and welcome to a short little discussion about what politics disadvantages are and how to answer them. In this video, I'm going to be talking about some of the major forms of politics disadvantages. Hopefully, through doing this, you'll get an idea about it. And of course, if there's any questions, feel free to email me or send me a Facebook message, and I'll be happy to fill in details if you have questions. So, when you're thinking about politics disadvantages, there's three big categories. And as I talk about each one of them, there's some subcategories within them. So, hopefully, this will help make sense. The first type of politics disadvantages is called agenda politics. The second type we'll call elections politics. And then the third type we'll call like specialized politics, which is going to deal mostly with the series of politics disadvantages that have happened since the current president has taken over. So let's start by talking about agenda politics. Now, the basic idea about agenda politics says that there is something that Congress or the president or the Supreme Court of the United States wants to do right now, and that if the affirmative plan passes, that thing either will happen and it's bad, or it won't happen and it happening would be good. So, as an example for this, you might say that, look, right now, Congress is really set on trying to pass a new bill that eliminates a lot of the regulations about climate change. But if the plan came in that somehow or another that plan, for whatever reason, would upset that, and so it would cause those regulations to not pass in the future, and those regulations to stop climate change would be really good because climate change is bad. There's a lot of different ways that we can kind of play with this, and I'll try to give specific examples as I go through each of the types of agenda politics disadvantages. So the first type of agenda politic disadvantage is either dealing with political capital or the notion of winners win. The whole idea here is that when the president of the United States passes anything or they encourage something to pass, that they either look awesome when they do it, and so when they look awesome in the future, they're able to get more things done. That's called winners win. Or they have to spend all of their time and energy getting the affirmative plan to pass, which means they don't have their time and energy to get other things to pass. And that's called political capital. It's kind of like if you think about how people spend money on something. If you spend all of your money buying a candy bar, you don't have more money to go buy something else in the future. And it's the same kind of way with the president. When the president goes and pushes really hard to get a specific agenda item passed because maybe Congress is opposed to it, then in the future they can't pass other things. President Obama was a good example of this. He spent a lot of time, energy, and political capital trying to get healthcare reform to pass. Finally got it to pass, but then from that point forward was not able to really get much else done. And so it's kind of one of those things. The argument here is that when the affirmative plan passes, that Congress doesn't like it, otherwise they would have already passed it. And so when the president pushes the bill through, which has to happen because of fiat or the idea that the plan's going to happen, that when Congress has to vote affirmative in order to vote for the plan, that the president loses all of their political capital, which means anything good in the future doesn't happen that the president might want to have happen. So the two ways that this might look, if it was a winner's win disadvantage, they would say, like right now, for example, under the Trump administration, that right now Trump wants to gut the EPA or wants to destroy climate change regulations or wants to destroy education funding or wants to destroy something else, but Congress is blocking it. When the affirmative plan passes, Congress doesn't want it, but Trump pushes it through, which makes him look like a winner. And that's bad because when Trump looks like a winner, he's able to convince Congress to do other things they might not want to do, like gutting the EPA or doing something with education formatting or something like that. And when he's able to do that, it causes other bad things to happen. That would be the winner's win disadvantage. The political capital disadvantage, on the other hand, might say something like, right now, Trump wants to do something really good. And I can't think of an example of what that would be, but they might have evidence about a new policy that Trump is trying to get to have happen. Okay. Like, for example, they might say Trump is wanting to withdraw from NAFTA right now, and that Trump is just barely going to be able to convince Congress to withdraw from NAFTA. The affirmative plan comes in, and Trump has to all of a sudden change his focus from withdrawing from NAFTA to passing the affirmative plan. He's able to get the affirmative plan passed because when the judge votes affirmative, fiat means it happens. But at that point, Trump has no more political capital, which means he's not able to convince Congress to vote to withdraw from NAFTA. And withdrawing from NAFTA is good because NAFTA is bad because it causes there to be environmental problems with Canada, or it causes there to be economic problems with Mexico, or any number of other things. And so you might be able to say that we shouldn't vote affirmative because having the federal government do the plan means Trump spends all of his political capital. With these two disadvantages, you basically answer them with each other. So if the affirmative is running their affirmative case and the negative says, here's a winner's win disadvantage. When the affirmative plan passes, Trump looks awesome. That means he's able to get these other things done. The way the affirmative wants to answer that back is saying, no, 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 no. When Trump passes the plan, it cost him political capital, which means he's not able to get other things done in the future. On the other hand, if you're affirmative and the negative reads a political capital disadvantage, saying that Trump is doing something really good right now and that the affirmative plan makes him not have that political capital anymore, you want to say, actually, that thing won't pass right now, like NAFTA changeover won't happen, and that winners win, which means that in the future, Trump would be able to get that to happen. That's kind of the political capital and winners win part of the agenda politics disadvantage. And honestly, that agenda piece is going to be really new. You're going to need to look for newer evidence on that, probably the Wednesday or Thursday right before a big tournament, to find out what kind of agenda items Congress is going to be looking at. The second type of agenda politics disadvantage talks about bipartisanship or partisanship and gridlock within Congress. So the notion is, bipartisanship is the notion that the U.S. Congress is basically made up of two different parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. Bipartisanship says right now they're getting along, okay? And that's good. But the affirmative plan, because it's divisive, because either it spends money and the Republicans hate it, or it causes trade-offs and the Democrats hate it, or whatever, it causes fighting because they don't like the way that it's going. And so when Congress starts fighting on one thing, it spills over and they start fighting on everything. And that's bad because they're not able to get some other agenda done. The opposite side of that story is the negative might say there's gridlock going on right now. Right now, there's a lot of partisanship. The Republicans and the Democrats hate each other. They can't agree on anything. They can't even agree on what day of the week it is, let alone whether or not to pass a specific bill. The affirmative plan comes in, and in order for it to pass, Congress has to come together and vote for it. And so when they come together and vote for it, they think, hey, it's not so bad to vote on the same thing. When they all vote on the same policy, it creates these good feelings, but that might actually be bad because they might start passing all kinds of things. Like right now, because the Republicans are in charge, you might say that there are bad things that would happen if the Republicans passed other new bills, like if they decided to pass school vouchers, that would be bad. Or it might be that they want to cut Medicaid, or that they want to engage in like pro-military things, or that they want to do whatever. And so you might be able to find evidence that says actually bipartisanship is bad, because when the government starts passing all kinds of new policies, it scares businesses, because businesses actually like things to be really stable. And so, again, the way you answer this is kind of with each other. The affirmative says their plan. The negative says that either breaks up bipartisanship or creates bipartisanship. And you can kind of use the links to go the other direction, that like partisanship doesn't spill over. The final kind of agenda politics talks about the United States Supreme Court. And this is kind of a nuanced one, but very rarely gets actually argued unless the affirmative plan is having the Supreme Court overturn a case. Sometimes you'll see that where the affirmative will say, the United States Supreme Court will blank, 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 blank. And the negative will say that when the Supreme Court takes action like that, that either maybe like the conservative justices feel like they've been wrangled and had to go the different way than what they've normally done, so they ask the more liberal-leaning justices to do the opposite next time, which is bad, or the other way around. Honestly, if you are not running a plan that involves the United States Supreme Court doing something, then you probably won't hear this argument. And if you don't have this as a disadvantage that you're planning on running, there's not a whole lot of details in here that I'll detail out with you. If you're running a U.S. Supreme Court type disadvantage, or if we're going to have that conversation, we can talk about that right before the round or when we're deciding on a strategy for that. So that kind of deals with agenda politics items. Again, like I said, the uniqueness here, or saying what's happening right now, is typically going to be found the week before, saying that this piece of agenda or that piece of agenda will or won't pass. You'll want to cut evidence going both directions so that you can use it against each other. And then you'll find a piece of evidence that says the affirmative plan creates bipartisanship. It creates partisanship, that the Republicans like it, the Democrats like it. And then there's some generic evidence. Oftentimes it says either like partisanship or bipartisanship spills over, or that like winners win, or that once the president uses their political capital that it's done. So a lot of that evidence we can talk about specifically, but hopefully that kind of gives you a big picture idea on how agenda politics look. The second type of politics disadvantages talk about elections. And the way the United States election system works, there's an election that's pretty influential about every other year. So in even years, 2016, 2018, 2020, there's a big election that will influence the federal government. In years that are in multiples of 4, 2016 and 2020, it's a presidential election. In 2018, 2022, 2026, etc., there will be a midterms election. And basically what these disadvantages say is this. Right now, one person or one party is winning the election race. The polls are going in that direction. Like, for example, before 2016, a lot of the politics disadvantages were saying Hillary Clinton is going to win the presidency. And then the link would say, however, passing a plan would cause Trump to win the presidency, and that's bad. It might say, for coming up right now with the midterms, it might say, right now there's a blue wave, meaning that the Democrats are winning a lot of local elections, and that's going to spill over when the next midterm happens, so a lot of Democrats will win the midterm election. The affirmative plan comes in and changes that because Trump passes it and it's great, or because the Democrats now all of a sudden don't have something else they want to push toward or whatever. And so they would say like that stops the blue wave, or that stops the Democrats from being able to win upcoming elections. And then they would say on the negative that that's bad because Democrats are awesome, because they want to stop climate change, or because they want to, a variety of other things. The way you answer these arguments are to say a couple of things. You can say that right now polling data is not good, especially after the 2016 election. There's a lot of evidence that talks about how polls are bad, about how they aren't reliable. I mean, realistically, nobody predicted, except for Fox News, that Trump was going to win the 2016 election. Even the best polling data didn't show that. And so you want to be finding evidence that says polls are unreliable, or that it's too early, or that voters don't care about politics, or that voters don't care about your plan. That's one of the ways to answer it. Another way to answer it is to say that right now that Republicans are going to win, or that the Democrats aren't going to win as many. And then you want to say things like, and the affirmative plan turns this. They make it more likely for Democrats to win. And you can kind of use this evidence to make an argument to say that the affirmative plan is actually a good idea because right now the Republicans are going to still maintain control over the Senate, but doing the affirmative plan, which is probably a little bit more of a liberal idea, encourages voters to say, look what we could actually do if we got behind it, which causes other people to vote for Democrats. And that's good because the reason Democrats are good are reasons why the affirmative plan is good. So realistically for this, again, the uniqueness evidence you're going to want to be finding right before the tournament, saying that either that you want to find evidence saying the Democrats are going to win, the Republicans are going to win. And if there's any specific like House or Senate seat that's really hotly contested, you might even want to find like one piece of evidence that says that that particular senator is going to win or that particular senator is going to lose. You never know what other teams are going to say, but that gives you a pretty good baseline of evidence to use against most people. The final kind of generalized politics disadvantage that I want to talk about for just a few minutes are like more specialized in the sense that they didn't really exist until the current president took office. And that would be what we'll call normalization disadvantages. So right now, I mean, forever and ever and ever since the invent of the politics disadvantage, even if people didn't like the current president, they didn't think that he was crazy. Okay? With Trump, there really is this perception that Trump is bananas and that Trump is so out of the norm that when the plan passes, it normalizes Trump, and that's bad because Trump's a racist and because Trump is crazy and because Trump upsets the entire rest of the world. And so when the affirmative plan passes, it normalizes Trump. It means that people stop protesting him, etc., which is bad. And so the way you want to kind of answer that, or the way you might want to make that as a disadvantage, is to say that like right now, Trump is really seen as abnormal, but the affirmative plan makes him normal, and that's bad. And then on the affirmative, you want to say like, well, right now Trump is starting to become more normalized, and 2 years down the line, the Trump jokes have gotten old, and people have kind of become immune to it, but that the plan would shock them back to their system, saying that whatever, and that would be good. Other things you might want to say is that the damage has already been done. Trump is so crazy that no one takes him seriously, etc., etc. Or that no matter how normal or abnormal Trump gets, that it doesn't change anything. Those are a lot of cards that you might want to look at. And like I said, with any of these, one of the things that you can say on the affirmative is that fiat, meaning that when the plan passes, that it happens so quickly that like Trump doesn't get any credit for it, that the Supreme Court really doesn't debate about it, that Congress really doesn't even think about it, that it just passes. And so there's no win to be achieved, there's no loss, there's no political capital, there's no normalization, there's none of that happens. And that's really a really easy logical argument you can make on the affirmative. If you're negative and they say things like that, you can make arguments against it, saying that, right, that's not the way things normally happen, which means that if you voted affirmative, something really abnormal would happen. And so it would actually create much more of the link. So if Trump, for example, was able to get this plan passed like that, it would cause him to look like even more of a winner, or it would cause him to look even more normal, or it would cost him even more political capital because Congress would vote for it just immediately, and it would create this big hassle. There's a lot of ways that those arguments can be answered back and forth. I honestly really like politics disadvantages because they encourage you to research current events that are really happening right now in Congress. It allows the teams that do the most research, the most recent research, to be the furthest ahead, as opposed to just who has the biggest team and who can do the largest amount of research over the largest period of time. I think it's a real equalizer. Plus, I think politics disadvantages are something that you can use against almost every case, which means that when someone reads an affirmative, even if you're not familiar with that affirmative, you at least have a negative argument that you can go toward. When I was in college debating at what is now called Missouri State University as the negative, I almost always ran politics disadvantages, and almost every one of my last rebuttals on the negative was a politics disadvantage and then some kind of a counter plan that doesn't link so that I could really go for politics. There are a lot of judges that don't like politics disadvantages. They think they're contrived, which is probably true. They think that there's not necessarily a trade-off between one and the other. But, I mean, there's a lot of different thoughts about it. There's a lot of teams that run them and a lot of teams that don't. So hopefully that maybe gives you an idea about the politics disadvantage. If you have specific questions, like I said, feel free to email me or Facebook me. And if you write answers or you write a front line, you write a disadvantage, I'll be super happy to look over it. And right before any major tournament, I like to write politics disadvantages. So I'll be happy to kind of do that as well. Like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or Facebook me. And hopefully this video has been instructive and we'll move forward from there. Okay, thanks so much.